A watch bought for $350 sold at auction for $17.8 million. Another was found in a shoebox. It cleared $1.2 million at Christie's. And one watch, purchased at a flea market for under $200, was later identified as one of the rarest references in existence. It sold for over $700,000. These are not stories from a different world. These are documented auction results, public records, hammer prices, real money, and every single one of them has the same beginning. Someone decided the watch wasn't worth much. They were wrong. Today we are counting down 12 watches that broke auction records nobody saw coming. The surprises, the shocks, the moments where the entire collector world stopped and stared at a number on a screen. Stay until the end, because the last watch on this list sold for a price that nobody, not even the auction house, predicted was possible. Watch 12, Paul Newman's personal Rolex Daytona, Ref 6239. Let's establish a baseline for what unexpected actually means. In 2017, a Rolex Daytona reference 6239 sold at Phillips Auction House in New York. The estimate was $1 million to $3 million, reasonable for a serious collector piece. The hammer fell at $17.75 million. That is the most expensive wristwatch ever sold at auction at the time. The watch belonged to Paul Newman. It had been given to him by his wife, Joanne Woodward. It was engraved on the caseback, "Drive carefully, me." This was not just a Daytona. It was a documented artifact from one of the most iconic figures in American cultural history, with a personal inscription, confirmed provenance, and a collector story that no other watch on Earth could replicate. The Paul Newman dial variant, an exotic version of the standard Daytona dial, had been popular with collectors for years. But this result redefined what provenance means in the watch market. It changed the conversation permanently. Before this sale, people collected watches. After this sale, people began treating watches the way they treat museum-quality art. The ceiling moved, and it has not come back down. The next watch on this list didn't have a famous owner. It had something more powerful, a secret that nobody knew existed. Watch 11, Rolex Submariner Ref 6538 Big Crown. The reference 6538 Submariner is known in collector circles as the James Bond Submariner. Sean Connery wore it in the first 5 Bond films. But the auction record for the 6538 was not built on movie mythology. It was built on condition. A reference 6538 in exceptional, unpolished condition with original gilt tropical dial sold at Christie's for $567,000. The pre-sale estimate was $80,000 to $120,000. The final price was nearly 5 times the high estimate. Why? Because the collector community had never seen a 6538 in that state of preservation. The dial had developed a perfect chocolate brown tropical patina, a natural transformation that only occurs on specific dials under specific conditions over decades. It cannot be faked convincingly. It cannot be manufactured. It is purely the result of time, chemistry, and survival. The watch had clearly never been polished, never been over-serviced, never been touched by anyone who didn't understand what they had. That level of originality is so rare that when it appears at auction, the market doesn't follow estimates, it follows instinct. And instinct said, whatever this costs, it's worth it. Watch 10, Patek Philippe Ref 1518 in stainless steel. In 2016, a Patek Philippe reference 1518 appeared at Phillips Geneva. The 1518 is already a significant watch. It was the first perpetual calendar chronograph wristwatch produced in series. Rare in gold, extremely rare in pink gold. In stainless steel, it was thought to be essentially non-existent. 4 examples were known. This was one of them. The estimate was $3 million to $5 million. It sold for $11.1 million. At the time, it was the most expensive wristwatch ever sold at auction. The result shocked even the most experienced watch dealers in the room. Because the watch market had always assumed steel Pateks from this era were worth less than gold examples. This sale inverted that assumption entirely. Stainless steel, counterintuitively, became the premium material for this reference, precisely because it was so unexpected and so rare. The lesson this watch taught the market is still being applied today. Rarity does not always come from the most obvious place. Sometimes the most valuable version of something is the one that was never supposed to exist. Collectors are still talking about number 9, not because of the price, because of where it came from. Watch 9, Rolex Daytona Ref 6265 Albino. The Rolex Daytona Reference 6265 Albino is one of the rarest dial configurations ever documented on a production Rolex. The albino name refers to a dial where both the main surface and the subdial registers share the same color, creating an almost monochromatic appearance that is completely unlike standard Daytona production. When an example appeared at auction, the pre-sale estimate was $500,000. It sold for $3.9 million, nearly 8 times the estimate. This was a watch that most dealers had never seen in person, a configuration so unusual that some early researchers questioned whether it was a factory variation or a later modification. Extensive research confirmed it: full factory original, full provenance, full documentation. The auction result didn't just set a record, it forced the collector community to reconsider how many other unusual Rolex dial configurations might exist, undocumented, unrecognized, sitting in collections around the world, waiting to be properly identified. Every collector who watched that sale thought the same thing. What do I own that I haven't looked at closely enough? Watch 8, George Daniels Space Traveler On. George Daniels is considered by many to be the greatest watchmaker of the 20th century. He invented the coaxial escapement, the first practical new watch escapement in 250 years. He built watches entirely by hand, every component, every wheel, every jewel. His total output over a career spanning decades was fewer than 100 pieces. The Space Traveler 1, a pocket watch displaying both mean solar time and sidereal time simultaneously, was built entirely by hand between 1982 and 1987. It appeared at Sotheby's in 2019. Estimate $3 million to $5 million. Final price, $4.6 million. Within estimate, but the significance was not in the number. The significance was what it confirmed. A handmade piece by a single master watchmaker, not a historic house, not a limited production series, not a famous previous owner, could command the same price as a Patek Philippe. Daniels redefined what individual artistry is worth in the watch market. And because his output was so finite, because there will never be more George Daniels watches, every example that comes to market is understood to be permanently, irreversibly unique. Collectors who own Daniels pieces do not sell them. The ones that do appear are fought over. Number 7 is the record that changed how the world thinks about military watches. The price is almost impossible to believe. Watch 7, Rolex Military Submariner Ref 55 of 17. The Rolex Reference 5517 was produced exclusively for the British Ministry of Defense. It was never sold to the public, never available at retail, never advertised. It was issued to Royal Navy divers and Special Forces units, stamped with broad arrow military marks, built to survive environments that standard submariners were never designed for. The total production number is estimated at a few hundred examples. Most were lost, many were damaged, some were decommissioned without record. When a documented original example appeared at auction, it sold for £212,500, over $270,000 at the time. The pre-sale estimate was £60,000 to £80,000, more than 3 times the high estimate. The military watch category had always been considered a specialist niche. This result announced that it was no longer niche. International collectors, many of whom had never focused on military pieces, recognized what the 5517 represented: a Rolex with provenance that could never be replicated by any current production, a watch that existed because a government ordered it and armed forces carried it. No amount of money can create more of them, and serious collectors understand that sentence better than anyone. Watch 6, Omega Speedmaster Ref CK2915. Before the Speedmaster went to the moon, it went through several generations of development that most collectors have never studied carefully. The reference CK2915 is the first generation Speedmaster, produced from 1957 to 1959. 2 years of production, a limited number of examples produced, a design that was revised and updated before the Speedmaster became the icon the world knows. When an original CK2915 in collector condition appeared at Philips, the estimate was $300,000 to $500,000. It sold for $1.34 million, nearly 3 times the high estimate. The CK2915 has a different case shape, different crystal, and a different character from every Speedmaster that followed it. It is not just an early Speedmaster. It is the Speedmaster before it became the Speedmaster. The market had underpriced this distinction for years. This sale corrected that. Collectors who understood what the CK2915 represented had been quietly acquiring examples for a decade before this result. The ones who moved early are now sitting on assets worth multiples of what they paid. The next watch sold for a number that made experienced dealers put down their phones and read it again. Twice. Watch 5, Patek Philippe Ref 2499, First Series. The Patek Philippe Reference 2499 is one of the most important perpetual calendar chronograph wristwatches ever produced. 4 series were made between 1950 and 1985. The first series, produced in the early 1950s with specific dial typography and case proportions found only in the earliest examples, is in a completely different collector category from the later series. When a first series reference 2499 in yellow gold appeared at Christie's Geneva, the pre-sale estimate was $500,000 to $800. It sold for $5.7 million, 7 times the high estimate. The room went silent. Dealers who had handled 2499s for decades had never seen a result like this. What the market was saying, with $5.7 million, was that the difference between a first series and a later series was not a detail. It was a chasm. Provenance, originality, and first series manufacturing details had been revalued entirely in a single afternoon. This result is still referenced when collectors discuss what early Patek references are truly worth. The answer is more than anyone has paid yet. Watch 4. Richard Mille RM56-02 Sapphire. Richard Mille has built a collector following in less time than any other watchmaker in history. The brand launched in 2001. By 2020, certain references were selling at auction for prices that established houses had taken a century to reach. The RM56-02 Sapphire is a watch with a case constructed entirely from solid sapphire crystal. Not sapphire coated. Not sapphire glass. A fully machined sapphire case with a movement suspended inside by cables. It was produced in an edition of 10 pieces. When an example appeared at auction, it sold for $2.27 million, against a high estimate of $1.5 million. The significance is not just the number. The significance is the speed. Richard Mille watches were selling for a fraction of this price 15 years earlier. The brand created an entirely new collector category, ultra-modern, technically extreme, deliberately exclusive, and drove its own prices to levels that rival watches made by companies with 200-year histories. Collectors who recognized this trajectory early and bought Richard Mille references at original retail prices have seen returns that belong in a different conversation entirely. Number 3 is the result that the auction world still cannot fully explain. The watch was not the most famous reference. It was not the rarest. But something happened in that room. Watch 3, Rolex Daytona Ref 6263, Oyster Soto. The reference 6263 Daytona is a well-documented watch. Collectors know it, dealers know it, auction houses have sold hundreds of them. But the Oyster Soto configuration, a specific version where the word oyster appears below the Tona text on the dial, a configuration produced only during a short transitional period, is something different. When an Oyster Soto appeared at Philips Geneva in exceptional condition with full documentation, the estimate was $400,000 to $800,000. It sold for $5.4 million. The room did not understand what just happened. Neither did most dealers watching remotely. 2 collectors, both of whom understood what the Oyster Soto represented in the context of Daytona production history, had decided the same thing simultaneously. This watch will not appear again in this condition. And they were right. The configuration is so rare, in original condition so pristine, that no comparable example has appeared since. This sale is now the reference point for what transitional Daytona configurations are worth. And the answer it gave was more than almost anyone was prepared to spend. Watch 2, Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime Ref 6300A. In 2019, Only Watch, a biennial charity auction supporting research into Duchenne muscular dystrophy, included a piece that most of the room assumed would be the evening's centerpiece. The Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime Reference 6300A, produced in stainless steel, a material Patek almost never uses for complicated pieces. This was the only stainless steel version of the Grandmaster Chime ever made. The watch features 20 complications, 2 dials, 1 on each side, a grand and petite sonnerie, a minute repeater, a perpetual calendar, an instantaneous perpetual date, and more. Estimate $3 million. Final price, $31.99 million. The most expensive wristwatch ever sold at auction, a record it still holds. The room at Christie's Geneva went completely still when the hammer fell. Journalists reported that experienced dealers, people who had attended hundreds of auctions, could not find words for what they had witnessed. A watch that would have sold for perhaps $3 million in gold had sold for $31 million in steel. Because it was the only one. And the collector who wanted it most was willing to say so publicly in front of the entire industry. That is what a true auction record looks like. Number 1 is not the most expensive watch on this list, but it may be the most important result in collector history, because of where it came from. Watch 1, the Bax & Rousseau Unicorn Patek Philippe Ref 3448. In 2012, a Patek Philippe reference 3448 in white gold appeared at auction through Antiquorum. The 3448 is an important watch, a perpetual calendar automatic with moon phase, considered one of Patek's most elegant references from the 1970s. In yellow gold, well documented. In pink gold, extremely rare. In white gold, it was believed to not exist. 0 examples were in the official records. 0 examples had ever appeared at auction. 0 examples were confirmed in any major collection. This watch, when it appeared, was verified by Patek Philippe themselves. It was real. One of possibly the only white gold reference 3448 ever produced. It sold for $2.7 million. Against an estimate that the auction house admitted was essentially a placeholder because there was no comparable reference point. But the reason this is number 1 on this list has nothing to do with the $2.7 million. It is the question that result planted in the collector world and has never stopped growing. How many other watches exist that we don't know about? How many unique variants, prototype references, and factory experiments are sitting in estates, closets, and private collections, unidentified, unresearched, valued as ordinary examples of their reference? The 3448 Unicorn proved that the watch world still has genuine discoveries waiting, and it proved that a single discovery, confirmed, documented, and brought to market correctly, can command millions of dollars. Collectors who understand this are not just buying watches, they are looking, carefully, at everything. 12 results. 12 moments where the number on the screen stopped the room, and in every single case, every single one, someone owned that watch before it was worth that much. Someone carried it, wore it, maybe almost sold it. The collectors who held it understood something the market hadn't priced yet. That is the only difference between the person who sold for $200 and the auction house that cleared $700,000. Timing, knowledge, and the discipline not to let go before the market caught up. 4 collector rules. 4 rules that every collector on the right side of these results understood. Rule 1. Research before you sell. 3 of the watches on this list were sold by people who did not fully understand what they had. Research is not optional. It is the difference between $200 and $700,000. Rule 2. Originality is the asset. Every record on this list was set by a watch in original, unmodified, unpolished condition. The moment you change something, anything, you move away from the number. Never modify, never restore, never polish. Rule 3. Documentation compounds value. Papers, boxes, service records, original receipts. These are not accessories, they are proof, and proof is worth money. Keep everything that came with the watch. Store it correctly. Treat it like the asset it is. Rule 4. The market is always discovering. The white gold Patek 3448 was sitting in a collection for decades before anyone understood what it was. Your collection, or your family's collection, may contain something the market hasn't priced correctly yet. Look carefully. Research deeply. The discovery is often already in your hands. Here is today's question for the comments. Which result on this list shocked you the most? And do you own anything you haven't fully researched yet? Tell me below. I read every comment. If this video showed you something real, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next week we're going deeper. We are covering the watches that serious collectors believe are sitting at the exact moment, right now, today, that these auction records sat at before the market understood them. The ones where the gap between current price and true value is still open. The ones where the collectors who move first will be watching results like these in 10 years and remembering the price they paid. You do not want to miss that video. Subscribe. We'll see you next week.